Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing I Saw the TV Glow. This was directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. I've gotten a lot of requests to review this film, and I can totally see why now that I have seen the film. This is another A24 surreal art horror type of film, and it's dabbling more in like the 1990s lo-fi analog type of aesthetic, which is obviously very nostalgic for a lot of us. It's a very abstract film, I will say, particularly in maybe the first half of it, where the allure is more in the emotions that you know are lurking beneath the surface, but you can't quite tie them together. This is a film about how media shapes our entire generation, which I find so interesting. I always try to think about, what if I was born in a time where there was no television, there was no anything like that? It's like, think about how you would filter the entire world. It's completely different. It's almost a completely different language. We do not realize how imagery, especially cinematic imagery, TV, all of that, how the media we have consumed over time, how it colors our inner world and especially our exterior world. And that's one of the things I think that this film overall captures quite well. I think it's beautifully abstract in a way that feels soothing, as if it's like soothing this ache that is always looming throughout the film. But naturally, along with that, there is an emptiness, there is a void, and this film is, about art as destruction, the way that we use art to enhance our pain. I have to tell you, I was mesmerized by maybe the first third of the film, maybe the first half of the film. Even though it's very muted so far as the plotting is concerned, that did not bother me at all, at least initially. It wasn't until I saw the film in its entirety that, yes, the first half did begin to bug me. But initially, I was all in here. I was so taken by just the experience of it and how it slowly paints this cinematic picture of loneliness that is punctuated by the art around them. Like the music that's in your headphones, the lights that you can see, like in the windows of a Christmas store or something. It's the sensitivity to all of those details that I thought was just lovely. I was so moved by it. It's like I didn't know exactly where the story was going at first, and yet I found myself just almost in tears because of it. It's the confidence in the style. It is the commitment to the stilted, minimalistic kind of exterior here that just hums subtly with this longing that is growing from the inside. And you're just so curious to see how it evolves, or at least I was. Really, everything that people had been saying to me made total sense. Even just within the first 5 minutes of the movie, I was like, oh yeah, this is destined to become kind of like a cult classic type of movie, something that's going to be passed around and we'll hear about it, off and on through the years. It did remind me a lot of like Donnie Darko. It's kind of like a midnight movie for the newer generation, naturally inspired heavily by, a director like David Lynch, but updated, I think, for, a younger voice. But yes, just wonderfully established visual aesthetic going on here. It feels like we're in some sort of like black light club from like the 1990s, where you're like in the middle of like a big dance crowd, and then suddenly the drugs wear off and you're like, wait, where am I? And you're all alone in this crowd. That is really the feeling I felt constantly throughout. At times I do wish that they could have tamed the symbolism and the imagery just a little bit. It worked pretty well for me in the first half. In the second half, I feel like things felt a little bit too played out, a little bit too obvious. But even so, it's just the essence of everything that I really like, that we're just hinting at what could potentially be in the hearts and the minds of our two main characters at the center here. And we're hoping to maybe tug at that ribbon more and more. I really like the way that the two main characters are introduced to each other. All of that felt so authentic. It feels like real kids. Both characters are clearly hurting, and they're clearly looking for some sort of companionship, but they don't bond over any deep conversations about who they are and stuff like that initially, or barely at all. But like any kids, it's like they're bonding through the media, through the pop culture that they both enjoy. And it's like we find the like-minded people through the pieces of art that we attach ourselves to. Especially in those days where you had physical copies of things. We didn't have social media, we didn't have, streaming, anything like that. So it's like media was passed around and recorded on tapes and that sort of thing, and there was a bond, a human bond through that. But as the film starts to shape and root itself into the ground, it does so through the framework of horror, as I mentioned before, and that's kind of the selling point, I would say, maybe in the movie trailer. But that's where I feel like it starts to lose a little bit of its commitment to the material. I think it loses its footing a little bit just as a piece. I mentioned David Lynch because it's very hard not to, especially as the movie progresses, but as the movie goes on, it's like you realize why David Lynch is such a master, and why a film like this, I think, lacks the awareness and the depth to truly plunge into that surrealistic realm. The logic, I think, behind Lynch's surrealistic vision is a lot more intact, typically. It's a lot more mature, more sophisticated, whereas this one starts to feel like it's capitalizing more just on a mood, more of like a thin sketch of an idea rather than something, yeah, truly nuanced. It has these story beats that just feel kind of played out as if we're needing to hit them because, it's a going through the motions sort of thing. And unfortunately, I think it starts to feel a little bit reductive so far as what it's saying about personal identity and discovering who you are, and the way that the art of the time acts almost like, like they're windows to the outside so we can kind of search for ourselves in that sense. It doesn't seem to be saying as much as I think it wants to say, and it just, I don't know, it felt like a lot of the ideas they were closing off, and I was like, no, I want this to really go further. That said, I love the concept here, and I love the way it shows how we age and how it's like, slowly as you start to develop yourself, it's like all of these memories of like cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons, and like commercials that we watched as kids. It's like it all starts to weirdly blend into our dreams, blend into our memories to the where you can't distinguish the two sometimes. I also like the contradiction between our two characters. They are very different so far as what they want, and yet they share something very similar. But the female character, she's a lot more honest about who she is compared to our main character, but she is very lost in the pursuit of this happiness that she craves, and thus the art and the nostalgia that she is wrapped up in becomes her self-destruction. But then you look at our main character, by contrast, who is terrified to, self-examine, try and discover who he is, so he just doesn't even try it. But he also isn't so desperate for human connection in the way that she is, at least so far as what we are shown in the film. And that contradiction that is created between them it's very tragic. And it leads to an interesting finale, but ultimately, I wish that it had a stronger payoff. It doesn't really go anywhere. I understand that our main character is like a shell of a person, and that, that awkward quiver and almost that high-pitched quality to his voice. It's almost clenched. All of that, I think, is beautifully performed. It works well with the character, but I kind of wish we understood more about why the character feels this obsession with TV and nothing else. And I wish maybe the relationship with his parents and the way they're so overprotective with him, I wish that were established a little bit more so it could be a catalyst for his own journey, particularly the relationship with his mother. I think it would help the moments where he's really tested and where he does feel fear and he recoils from a moment. We would feel the emotion of that a lot more. I should say, we would feel the tragedy of that a lot more. I wanted that sense of longing to build so we see how much he has buried of himself and how much he fails to recognize himself at the end of the film, especially when we have that big moment, and you know what I'm talking about if you've seen the film, and yet I just didn't really feel it. I think part of the problem is, yes, as the aesthetic starts to become more literal in the story, there's like this symbolic clutter, and I feel like it muffles a lot of the humanity within the characters. And that's when the ideas, yes, they start to feel simplistic rather than taking us in new directions. I think with somebody like David Lynch, when you look at a movie he made like Mulholland Drive, which this seems to be heavily borrowing from, notice how it plunges deeper and deeper into its ideas, almost like it's an abyss and it's not afraid of that. It gets to the point where that devastating desperation at the center of his film is literally screaming at you in the final minutes of the film. And it is so powerful and so emotionally overwhelming. The first moment for me when I started to feel like the artistry of it, the aesthetic was not quite authentic, was when we started to get the fourth wall breaks. Especially when our main character is starting to talk to the camera. I can see what they're trying to do, but I just don't think that it works very well. To me, fourth wall breaks, I've talked about this, they are very deliberate, they're very difficult to pull off well, because I think there has to be a very important reason for us to have that dramatic tonal shift. To me, the emotion has to build to that moment where it's like you can't imagine any other way for this to happen other than a fourth wall break. That's just not the case here. It's a way to kind of conveniently blend the reality and the fantasy with our main characters, but it's more a way to kind of just hammer out plot points because it's mainly just exposition. And it felt almost like, oh, we're too lazy to explore this narratively, so we're just gonna do this here. And it's like, oh, isn't this very artistic? So yeah, it's like when you look at somebody like David Lynch, again, it's like, I get why, so many people are influenced by him. I get why so many filmmakers borrow from him. I really do. It's also kind of rough because it makes you realize with his films, especially the really, the great masterpieces, it's like the aesthetic is, blossoming from the central emotion, whereas this is kind of the other way around. And I'm talking about, once I've seen the whole film in focus, like once it's all over, but you know, I have to say, the journey getting to the end of this film, it's like, while it was messy, it was an experience. And it's frustrating because I think this film could have absolutely been a masterpiece, and I want it to be a masterpiece. I just love like the dreamy colors, the violets, that sense of longing you can feel in every single shot, every single moment. Just that sparkle that you can feel in the monotone in that first half of the film really inspired me. It just didn't quite have the legs to make it through the whole arc of the film, and that was really disappointing to me. But I am absolutely recommending this film to film lovers. I wanted to see the film because, yes, it looked very creative in the imagery and all of that, you know, when I saw the trailer initially, but just it was more the reaction from people that it was so polarizing, that some people really loved it, some people were, you know, hated it, weren't sure what they felt. And it's those mixed reactions that I find to be the most intriguing. It makes me want to see the film and decide for myself how I feel. But I do think that this one will have lasting power. As I said, it is a film that, for all of its faults and all of my frustrations with it, I can't deny it, it has a hold on me, and I can see myself thinking about this film a lot throughout the year. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.